purpose of this video is to remind you what to do with those decimals when you're doing addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division with them. Before starting this video, you should have the paper handout, the foldable for decimal operations, in front of you, and be prepared to complete the foldable as I guide you through it. Make sure you've looked at the example taped up front on the board so you know how to fold and cut the foldable. Now, to continue on, to get started, on the upper left flap, so if this were your foldable all folded up, here's the center, and you've folded, these are the pieces you folded over. So here's the folds on either side, and here's your flaps, those dotted lines you cut on. And the upper left flap on the outside should say adding decimals. Okay. And we're going to work behind that flap right now. Behind that flap you can see that it says you're going to line up the decimal points. So you're going to line up, fill in the blanks as you hear in red, line up the decimal points like this. And these two numbers, so this might have looked like 9.8 plus 2.12, but I'm going to drop this 0 in here in order to be a placeholder to help me be more accurate, make sure all my place values are lined up. So I'm going to line up the decimal points. I'm going to add them the same as I would with whole numbers. So you may have to drop in zeros as placeholders. All you're going to do when you add as you would whole numbers. Just bring that decimal point straight down. See, that comes straight down here, exactly between the same positions it was. And then you are done adding your decimals. Okay, the second flap I want to go over is the one below the adding decimals. And that flap is subtracting the decimals. Subtracting. Hopefully you can get your words right all the way on that flap. Trying to just do it in the little corner here. And when we subtract decimals, again, we still want to do the same thing. If I had 9.8 minus 2.12, I'm going to line up the decimals. In other words, I'm lining up place value. Here's where that dropping in the 0 is especially important. So I'm going to subtract as I would with whole numbers, but I've got to make sure I drop this 0 in here so I've got something in every place value represented by a digit. Then I'm going to need to regroup and borrow as I subtract. So I'm going to rename this a 7 and create that into a 10. 10 minus 2 is 8. 7 minus 2 is 6. Again, I'm just going to bring that decimal point straight down, and then 9 minus 2 is 7. As easy as that. So line up the decimals, then subtract the same as you would with whole numbers. You may have to drop in zeros. Then you're going to regroup and borrow, bringing down the decimal straight down into your answer. Okay, now we're going to go to the upper right flap for multiplying decimals. So here on the back of that flap, multiplying decimals. So when you multiply them, you really do it the same exact way as you would with whole numbers. You do not line up the decimals, and you just, those furthest right digits, so here's our furthest right digits right here, you line those up and wherever the decimals fall. So just as if you had this number without the decimals, you still line up these digits right here. Erase that, I don't want to have any confusion by that. So this problem is 1.159 times 300ths, or decimal 03. So 9 times 3 is 27. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 2 is 17. 1 times 3 plus 1 is 4, and then 3 times 1 is 3. Now my next row I'm going to be multiplying by zeros, so there's not going to be any change. It would be a whole row of zeros. So there's really no point in doing that row of multiplication. So essentially you're done with the work part, the multiplying part. But now you have to go back and you have to look at it and say, where's this decimal going to go? So you have to count how many are behind the decimal to start with. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you start back here and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And drop a 0 down in there. So you're going to have the same number of digits behind the decimal point as you did when you started the problem. We started with 1, 2, 3 behind, and 2 others, which makes 5. So after I do my multiplication, I go ahead and make that answer look the same way. So this equals decimal 0, 3, 4, 7, 7. Okay, that last flap on the bottom right is going to be dividing decimals. So here's the division problem I'm going to use, and it's 0.88 divided by 1.6. Okay? So I'm going to move this decimal over one place and do the same thing in the dividend. Then this decimal is going to just stick right here between the 8 and the 8. I'm going to rewrite that so it's not quite as close up here as it is right now. Alright, so I can't put 16, so now I look at it as if it's 16 or 88 divided by 16. That's how I'm going to do this division. I cannot put anything into the 0 or the 8. The 16 won't fit. So I'm going to start with the number 88. And I know that I can do that 5 times. 5 times 16 is, whoopsie, wrong place. Got to line it up under the number I'm dividing it into. 5 times 16 is 80. Okay, this 0 really has no meaning to me. Neither does that one except a placeholder and to remind me that there's nothing in front of that decimal. When I find the difference there, I end up with 8. Now, I need to keep going. I have something left over. I need to figure out what decimal value is this going to end up being. How is this going to look if I keep dividing out? So I'm going to drop a 0 into this place value. And actually, first I'm going to go back and I'm going to fix this. This doesn't look the way it needs to look here. So I'm going to fix this up just a little bit. The 5 needs to be right over the 8. I need to get my next 0 there so that I'm dropping that 0 down here. I'm doing 80. Now we know already, I told you 16 times 5 is 80. So there's going to be another 5 here. This is the last digit in my number I'm dividing. Subtract by 80. And I have 0 left. So this is my quotient. So make sure you have all your flaps completed, that you have an example next to each flap. So you've got your foldable here. And if it were open, you'd have a black line there, a cut, black line, the cut, and over here on these sides, here's a fold right here, and a fold right here. And here's where the printed words are. And you need to make sure you got those blanks filled in. Here's printed words. You've got a couple blanks. Same here on the right, on both of those flaps. And then in each of these white spaces on your foldable, you need to put an example for the operation that it's representing, where these words are talking about here next to the example words. All right, good luck.